Today, we're going to be explaining some of the most commonly used wide receiver terms. So the first one is going to be attacking leverage. So this is a great route from Jackson Smith-Njigba on a post curl route where he attacks this DB's leverage when he has an outside shade zone or off man coverage. So anytime that we line up on the line of scrimmage and we look at a DB, he's going to have a specific leverage, right? He's either going to be lined up like shaded to the outside, he's either going to be right in front of me, or he's shaded to the inside. Now that might change, right? He might be press coverage right up on the line of scrimmage, right in my face, outside shade, middle, or inside shade. He might be 2 to 3 yards off, or he might be off an off man or zone coverage like this, but he is always going to have a leverage. Now, I would say probably 9 times out of 10, you are going to want to attack that DB's leverage. So Njigba's running a post curl route, right? So that's an inside breaking route. Rather than him just taking off and running the post curl and then having this DB be right on his hip and zone coverage, he attacks his leverage, which means that he is angling his stem and angling his route towards the outside, aka the DB's leverage. So what that's going to do is the DB's lined up outside leverage for a reason. He wants to protect the outside, and he doesn't want the wide receiver to go to the outside. So if I angle my route to the outside, that is the best way to get him to move. And when he can widen, that creates a bigger window to the inside for me to run my inside breaking route, whether that's a dig, whether that's a curl, whether that's a post, or whether that's a post curl. Now, is this something that you could only do when he's in off coverage? Absolutely not. Let's say, for example, this DB's lined up in press coverage outside shade. You do the same thing, except it would not be your stem. You would attack his leverage by giving like maybe a jab step to the outside, a release to the outside to widen him so you have more space back to the inside to work your route. So one of the most commonly used wide receiver terms, at least by myself, is to attack a DB's leverage, and that is what it means. Now, term number 2 is going to be something called getting skinny. Now, before we explain what getting skinny is, guys, if you're a wide receiver and you would like a 2-month-long daily training schedule that you guys can do in the field and at the gym, check out that very first link in the description below for our elite wide receiver training package, which you'll get access to, guys, is 8 weeks of daily on-field route running, press release, catching workouts, where we break down the exact sets and reps to do for each drill, video examples of each drill, and we put it into a schedule like Monday you're doing this, Tuesday you're doing that. We map it all the way out for you guys. And then we do the exact same thing in the gym with gym exercises that receivers should be doing. So guys, again, if you're interested in our elite wide receiver training package, check out that very first link in that description below. Let's get back to this video. So the term getting skinny, this is actually going to be a bad example of getting skinny, and then we're going to show a good example of getting skinny from Justin Jefferson. So getting skinny is essentially where after your route, after your release, you run tight to the DB. So you see how this wide receiver left a big gap, and yeah, this route still worked, right? It was still able to work, but he should have had way more separation on this. But you see how he gives this inside fake here? So he's going to be doing like a split jab release. A split release is exactly how it sounds. Your front foot goes up and your back foot goes out. So, or excuse me, your front foot goes out and your back foot moves up. Both feet are making contact with the grass at the same time. And then he gives this little hip and shoulder sway to the inside to get this DB to bite. So if we wanted to get skinny right at this point, you would try to get hip to hip with this DB. You would try to squeeze by him, but this wide receiver takes a very, very wide angle. So the thing about this wide angle is it allows this DB to recover and cut the wide receiver off. So he could either recover and stay back over the top of him, or it makes it harder for this wide receiver to get over the top and restack the DB. Restacking the DB is when this DB is trailing behind us, and that's the whole reason we want to get skinny in the first place, so I can restack. The reason why we'd want to restack on a route like a dig route is because if he's running behind me, I'd give a fake to the outside, I could give him a hard fake to the outside, and then be able to slip back underneath and get him to bite. So we never want to run away wide like this, guys, because it just makes it harder to do. Now, this wide receiver is dropping his hips and slipping under the DB. Now, this is also much harder to do when we don't have space and we're not running right tight to the DB. Because if that DB was right next to us, what I could do with this inside hand is I could put it on the back of his shoulder, I could put it on the back of his hip, and then be able to slip underneath him much easier. But because there's this gap of space, he's able to open up and make a play. So guys, you got to get skinny. So let's show this good example of Justin Jefferson getting skinny so you guys have a better idea of what getting skinny or squeezing past the DB actually means. So he's going to be running a post route with an inside release. So he gives this move to the DB. He attacks his leverage. Remember the first thing that we talked about, guys? We've got a DB who's lined up outside shade. We have an inside breaking route route like a post. He's going to attack his leverage with his release on the line, but watch how tight he runs to this DB to be able to stack him. Now, why is it important when you're raking on a route away from the DB's leverage? And we're going to talk about that. But he gives this move to the outside, attacks this DB's leverage. Okay, cool. We're trying to close the distance with him, fake like we're going to the outside, gets him to move. Now, rather than running away from him and running way to the inside, he goes right past him like we talked about. He squeezes past him. He dips this inside shoulder. He swats this DB's inside arm. Why is he doing that? Because, guys, when you have a DB who's lined up outside shade or outside leverage, he has something called safety help. So the only reason he's outside shade in the first place is because he knows that, okay, don't get beat to the outside, force him inside where we have some type of help. So I'm going to try to make this as hard as possible on the receiver from a DB perspective. I'm going to sit outside because I know I don't have help out there. But if he's running an outside breaking route, he's going to have a tough time with it. If he's running an inside breaking route, he could just run away and go right into my help. So if I do that as a receiver, I'm doing his job for him. I want to attack him. I want to close the space, but I want to get right past him, hip to hip, so I could still give my quarterback a bigger window. If I'm running this post and I'm way over here, that's a tight window. You got a DB on your hip, and you got a safety who's closing in over the top. Give the quarterback space. So we get hip to hip with them. We get this DB trailing our back hip. We give a hard fake outside, and you see the separation we're able to get. So getting skinny not only helps with separation, but it also helps with spacing on the route, you guys. So that's what getting skinny is. I'm going to play both clips one more time. Remember, guys, don't run away from the DB. We want to try to stay hip to hip with him, squeeze past him, dip the shoulder that's closest to him so you guys can get in that position to stack, make a move, and then go. So now, next term that a lot of wide receiver coaches will say, myself included, is you want to try to step on the DB's toes. I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard that, like, oh, step on his toes, step on his toes. I refer to that as closing the distance. So this is a clip here from CeeDee Lamb. He's running like a slant route or like a quick glance route, if you will, but he's got a DB again who's lined up outside shade, right? So if he's outside leverage, what do we got to do? We got to attack his leverage. Now, I don't want to just give like a quick jab off the line and leave 2 to 3 yards of space because I got to get to this portion of the glance route. I got to get to the top of the break. So if I just give a quick jab and there is all this space, I still got to get here. Nothing changes about the route except because I didn't close the space, because I didn't step on the toes, the DB could cut me off to that angle. So I got to make sure that I take the release to him. I try to step on his toes, I give him that move, and then I get up into my route. Let's think of it not like a glance route. Let's think of it like just a regular post route. You guys will draw it up on the screen right here. Let's say you got to run a post route. Let's say the receiver's lined up here and we got a DB who's here. If I just give a quick move and the DB jumps and then I got to break up here to my post route, I got to go inside and that DB could easily beat me to the angle. But let's say, for example, I'm going to undo all this. Let's say I close the space, get him to jump. I go right past him, squeeze past him, get skinny, and go get to that post route. So it's all tied together, guys. Attacking leverage, squeezing a DB, or attacking leverage, getting skinny with a DB, and closing the distance / stepping on his toes. So Lamb closes the space, runs at him, gives him this move, but it's right onto his toes. Not only does this make a DB uncomfortable, but it makes it easier for us to swap by, get separation, and get up into my route. So let's play this thing again, full speed one more time. So that's what it means, guys, by stepping on the DB's toes. That's a great way to be able to get separation. All right, so now, next term that we are going to be discussing is a move that wide receiver use, and moves that wide receiver use against press coverage DBs to be able to get a little bit more speed with their release and to be able to step more so outside the DB's frame to get him to jump. And that is something called a kick step. So a kick step is not a false step, you guys. There are a lot of older school wide receiver coaches that will say this type of move is not needed. It's too slow. It's a false step. I don't believe that's the case, you guys, if used properly. So a kick step is what you would do with this back leg in your stance. So you see how this receiver's left foot is up? You would do it with your right foot. So what he does here is his right foot kicks behind his left so he could throw that wide step release, that jab step release a little bit further, a little bit faster to be able to get separation from this guy. So let's talk about this, right? So this move, you guys, it has to be fast. If this is not a fast kick step, there's no point in doing it. We punch the ground as fast as we can. And what that does, that loads up our hips because this DB is lined up in head up press. So remember, we talked about leverage, right? We talked about a DB being an outside leverage and then a DB an inside leverage. And sometimes he's right in front of our face. If I have to run a post route, right? My goal is to get him to jump to the outside so I could take that inside release. I have to actually step to the outside. I got to make it look like I'm just trying to do a quick speed release to the outside. So I need speed with my feet, but I also need to gain ground. So when you do this kick, it loads up your hips to allow you to throw your hip with the cut. Your hip should be attached to your foot, because not only is that what a DB is watching, he's watching our hips when it's man-to-man coverage. So your hip being wide sells the route more, sells the release more, I should say, but it also gives me a little bit more explosion with the cut. The cut is now inside of my frame. If I stepped here and left my hips over where I drew this box and this X, that cut would have no explosion, nor would we have any speed. So that is why we do that kick step, you guys. It loads up your hips to help you throw and sell, but it also creates some explosion. Doing a release like this with dead feet, like just completely just like still stance off the ball, is going to make us very, very slow, okay? So now, next move I'd like to talk about here is something called a rocker step. So some of you may have heard of this. Some of you may have heard myself say this or other coaches say, and you may be confused. You may not know what it is. So a rocker step is essentially like a 1-2 at the top of the break. So you step in the direction you were going first to try to sell like you were running like a post route or whatever. You could use this rocker step. I like it on a 10-yard out, 10-yard dig, a post, or a corner. Those are probably my 4 routes that I would use this on. Anything deeper than, I would say, 8 yards where you could cut off a 1 foot. That's the key. So Jefferson's using this on this out route right here, right? So he bursts up. So you would step in the direction you're going first. So we were going to the out, so you would step out first. We are going to the left, so you would step with your left foot first. Now, this rocker step is the first step of it is a short, quick step. You're shooting your foot into the grass, and we push off of it to sell this second cut. The second cut is more important than the first cut as far as distance goes and as far as your hip going with the foot. Very, very similar to that kick step jab release that we just looked at. But we were trying to sell opposite of where I'm actually going. Just think of it like a simple crossover like you would do in basketball, or against press coverage, a simple crossover. But we step in the direction we were going first. So if he was going to do this, and let's say he was going to run a post route, he would step with his right foot first, then sell with the left foot. So again, guys, you step in the direction we're going first. The first step is a shorter step where you're punching your foot into the ground so you could push into the next step to sell that move more. Now, next move or next term that we're going to talk about is something called a peek back move. So a peek back move is something that you could use in the red zone. Now, like on routes, we talk about this a lot, right? Like this receiver is going to be running a comeback route. Now, on a comeback route, what do we want to do from point A to point B? We want to be able to sell something called a fade route. And selling a fade comes from me running hard, running with the same stride frequency, and running with the same body language frequency, aka keeping things the same. You want the same speed, same stride, same body language to make this defender think we're running deep. Now, in the red zone, that may not work. DB's going to be smart. He knows that you're not going to run out of the back of the end zone, so he's expecting something underneath. So a peek back move is a great move you can use on all outside breaking routes in the red zone. You could use it on a stop route, you could use it on an out route, a comeback route, or even a corner route in the red zone. So this wide receiver gives a move, peeks over the inside shoulder, gets that DB to think fade, and then he's able to snap this thing off and win on that comeback route to the bottom pylon. So let's talk about it, right? So again, guys, a DB's not supposed to be looking at your eyes, but in the red zone, you're always a threat of that quick goal line fade over the shoulder. So when we could peek back to the quarterback, the key on this move is to make sure that when I peek back, I don't lean back. Because if you're running and your chest is way up, you're leaning back, you're going to be slow. And that change in speed is not going to threaten the DB. If I could maintain my speed and just have a slight glance over my inside shoulder, I could continue to pump my arms and I hold my eyes all the way until the break point. That is going to get us some space, guys. So a peek back move is a great move that you guys can use on outside breaking routes while you're in the red zone to still be able to sell that fade.